What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to talk about the Bitcoin price chart as it is on a very monumental day in its price chart history, as today represents the exact same amount of time as the length of the 2018 through 2021 bull market to the day. As we reach this historic milestone, I posted shortly after it became the new day of as the clock strikes October 4th, 2025 on the charts, we have reached the full 2021 cycle length. I am now 50% in cash with a rare Saturday video released tomorrow. And so this entire week, I've spent the whole week trying to show the other side of the market when it comes to indicators, behavior, altcoins, essentially presenting things from rather than the up-only bull side, but rather from the bearish divergence side, or the realities of what Q4 of 2021 looked like, and the cycle behavior of the 2021 bull market, where there was a big rally that took place after the election, and then things kind of petered out while we all kind of sat around looking for an alt season to show up here on that secondary rally back in 2021. But in today's video, I'm going to really dive into what ultimately led me to the decision of being at 50% cash. This decision was not taken lightly. I haven't had a day off from crypto in a couple of weeks. And every day feels like they've been 12 to 15 hour days for weeks on end. So it's, of course, been very physically tolling to put in all this work to make these decisions. And of course, when you make these types of decisions, they're not easy. There's a lot of mental gymnastics you go through when you do things like this. So today, I'm going to present all those reasons. Now, I will say, I do still have 50% of my capital in the market. So I'm certainly not cheering to lose that. So hopefully these things don't pan out. But there has to be a very thorough explanation as to why, and I believe I'll be able to do that here. And I think we can kind of approach it from an interesting perspective. I think the way we can actually approach it is if we came at it from the angle and said, hey, it's 6 months from now, right? Let's pretend it's like April of 2026 right now. It's next year. And let's pretend the price does fall from here, okay? And then I look back on this moment and I say to myself, why didn't I sell any when we were right there? And the reason I would have to say that I didn't sell anything right here is because I would have had to come up with the argument of saying, well, because this time is different. But in reality, we don't know if this time will be different. And so I think you'll get what I'm saying as we progress throughout this video. Now, I can tell you that my case is much stronger than just saying, hey, look, the number of days line up, so that means that it's time. But there may have been a little bit to do with it in regards to why this week was chosen to be the one to showcase all of these different elements that are happening in the market. But when we come back and look at Bitcoin's 4-year cycle history, it's really kind of the cliche thing that we always hear when we're going through a bear market, right? Whenever we're down in the depths of despair, everybody says block reward halving isn't even priced in yet, right? You hear that all the time. Then, of course, we have the 4-year cycle, and then everything gets there, and we all get up here, and everybody's outrageously bullish, and we get, and this time is different. It's Q4. We're all going to play hot potato, but everybody still intends to sell in Q4 at the same time, right? But in regards to this particular chart, it is actually quite fascinating to see how when we take a look at it from the perspective of the actual literal top coming in here back on November 10th of 2021, then we head down here and look at where the bottom is of the market down there in November of 2022. It's even more fascinating when we look at it when it actually goes into the actual escape from the past all-time high on both of these, that these cycle timings are quite odd on how they're working in here. So to play the this time is different game, right? Well, one, you have to look at all of these things and, to take no action here, what are you implying? You're implying this time is different. Another thing I was thinking to myself, if I was 6 months removed from this moment right now, and if this market had fallen from right here, and if I wasn't taking any profit during this moment, and we look back on it, and we said, you kind of had all this figured out. You kind of had all these ideas in here that you thought this is how this was going to play out. But then when we were in that moment right there, why didn't you take any profit? And it's like, well, there was a couple of things and I thought maybe this time would be different. I think about that person 6 months from right now, looking back on this moment right here after spending nearly a year discussing these things and then thinking, what was I thinking in the moment? But it's the reality, right? This is a thing that we've talked about for months on end. We end up getting the exact correction that was anticipated. Now we're up in here. The big confusion has been, is this going to end up being a retrace, a parabola? Is this going to end up being just a quick crash? Is this going to be Wyckoff distribution? I think it's very reasonable that this could even just be another distribution event that's happening right here. Show it from this perspective that really it's just doing The same types of things that we've seen it do multiple times already. And I'll zoom that out a little more to show, there you go, that this could just end up being another distribution that's happening in here like we've seen over and over and over. So when it comes to the overall entire wave and cycle, this is what my thoughts were. This is where we are, coming off the heels of all the discussions we've had for the last 8 months that eventually led to our ABC correction, and then we're just hovering up in here, right? But one of those interesting things as well is beyond there just being this timing of these things occurring in here for Bitcoin, and today happens to be the day that is the exact same amount of length. Of course, the things that have happened in here have been these bearish divergence oscillators and indicators with the relative strength index, and of course over here with the moving average convergence divergence. We've done really the exact same stuff in here to go ahead and have a big bearish divergence on a new high, and then already have had the crossovers. So to say it's going to do something different, maybe, but I look forward 6 months from right now and then say to myself, well, why didn't you do anything during that? And I say, I don't really know. It would be like, well, you had the exact timing, you had the bearish divergence crosses, you had the exact structure you were looking for. Why didn't you do anything? Right? So that kind of sets the theme for the things that we're going to look at coming up here too. For other things we've talked about on the channel really over the course of the last year, and new things we may have discussed recently as well. But to be at cycle length, to be at cycle behavior, to be at the bearish divergences, I almost feel like you could make the argument good enough just with that. But we'll go much deeper than that. We've also entered into a cutting cycle with the Fed. Now, I know on crypto Twitter, all over the place, the idea is, hey, once we enter into a cutting cycle, it's very bullish for markets. But historically speaking, over the course of the last 25 years, when we're in a cutting cycle, it's not exactly bullish for the market. People always say, what are you talking about? The Fed cut and then the market rampaged. Well, the market rampaged once the Fed got to zero. But the actual cutting process, where they were actually cutting rates down, we were actually bearish. It took the rates getting all the way down to the lows, and then the market ricochets. The same thing happens over here in the 2008 Great Financial Crisis. They're cutting and cutting and cutting because there's problems underneath the hood. The market starts crashing after they already start the cuts, right? And then once we finally get to zero, then the market can find a bottom. The same thing goes over here during C19. We go through cutting, but we pause out for a little bit, and then cutting, and then we go 40% down. But here we are now. Again, we're now back to resuming the cutting once again. Add it to the list. Okay, so what? This time was different for the cutting, right? 6 months from right now, looking back and saying, well, you always knew that when the cutting was happening, what ended up happening to the markets? Well, there was problems underneath the hood, but this time was different. Right. Another one we've looked at, of course, has been the US dollar currency index, or the DXY. Back in 2021, nearly the entire bull run took place during the double bottoming process of the DXY. A little bit more of a pop so once we got beyond it, but the vast majority of it was already done during that time. As we know, this fall has been very remarkable of what that looked like as well, with all these same little phases happening in here. And while we are now beyond the double bottom, so will this time be different? I would say one of the things that probably strikes me as the craziest of all of these things is that as we, of course, get here and reach this milestone, what other milestone is being reached at the exact same time? Silver closed 1 cent below its 1980 high here on Friday. Now, I do not know what it's going to mean if that busts out of there. I don't know what it's going to mean if it actually rejects from there. But what I do know is there's the potential here for it to be a pretty big event of something that hasn't happened in 45 years. And what is the market telling us if it's going to break out of this 45-year resistance level that it's been stuck under? I think we're all left wondering. But I think another thing that has really had my attention recently has been the post-election breakout and the Q4 discussions, of course, that have been happening here over the last few weeks, Q4. And then really reflecting back on, all right, let's take a look at what Q4 of 2021 was actually like and replay all of that. I've done that here on the channel. I've shown some of that stuff over there on X to show Q4 of 2021 really wasn't anything spectacular. You did have some coins that were able to break into new highs, and the meme of it all plays out Q4, but it certainly was not like what we saw in 2017, which of course is what we're all cheering for, right? Outrageous 10x gains. But we definitely did not get that in Q4 of 2021. While everybody was looking for 10x, we ended up getting about 0.3x. in Q4 of 2021 on average. I shared this in a video earlier this week of what Q4 looked like for various altcoins, such as XRP, that it starts here on October 1st of 2021. We still just kind of get stuck in this retrace action of all the crazy stuff that happened back in April and May of 2021 to then roll over and actually end up closing out Q1 lower than where we started. Same thing goes over here for Dogecoin, which was like the big retail investor coin of 2021. Remember the huge rally in May and April. And then we get over here to Q4, and this was the price action of all of Q4. Same thing goes for Chainlink, and we can kind of go on and on and on and on like this for a lot of the coins to show that like the stigma attached to Q4, everybody was really reflecting back on 2017. Everyone's really kind of skipping, well, what was the last one like? What was 2021's like? And so once I started kind of like really thinking about this and looking at it from this perspective, I said to myself, okay, well, are we mimicking anything currently right now that looks way more like 2021 rather than it being 2017, where we're again looking for that infamous crazy 10x alt season to show up here at the end? Are we actually acting a whole lot more like we were in Q4 of 2021? And that's, of course, where these things come into play again, right? We're talking about these bearish divergences, these MACD crosses happening in here. This is resemblance of what Q4 of 2021 looked like, right? This is Q4 of 2021 and where we were at. But again, a chart that really stood out to me was looking at it through the perspective of what H bar looked like and how the massive rally that we saw back in November is the same type of rally we saw back in 2020 and 2021. We get through the elections and then the market has a big rip. And that's what we historically do. We did that in 2012, 2016, 2020, and again here in 2024. It's like that's what the real 4-year cycle actually is, getting through elections and then that stuff all shoots off. But if you were instead looking at it through the perspective of Q4 of 2021, are we all sitting here waiting for an alt season to show up again when we're actually well beyond it? We've already had our pump, we've already had our retrace, and now it's just kind of waddling sideways as potentially Bitcoin's doing the same thing that it did back in 2021. And the timings of these are not by chance. Look at how they end up reacting. We're talking about Bitcoin operating on like a nearly identical timetable. Well, you could see where the takeoff starts from. You can see where the peak comes in here for the first rally. And then you could see the secondary rally coming in right in here with it again peaking at the same time again. And for reference, this is Q4 of 2021. Not this, not this. This is Q4 2021. But HBAR wasn't able to set a new all-time high in this rally that we just had this summer. Most things didn't, but XRP actually was one that did. Now, we've looked at this through the lens of what would it be like if this was like an ABC correction happening for XRP up in here before it rampages and goes. And by all means, please God, may that be what it is. However, we've also discussed it through the lens of what if it's not. And people have asked me this months ago, what would be the thing that would start making you concerned that it's acting differently than that, right? And my very clear outline has been, well, like what Cardano did back in 2021, that if we just saw the price really just start meander around in here and really just kind of waddling on top of the 618 fib, it kind of opens that door for that happening. Sure enough, that has been the similar price action that has happened here on XRP. And if we were maybe to look at it through the lens of like Hedera and what would it be like if we're just kind of like way past the post-election breakout, we're already in Q4 of 2021, what would be going on here? And that is where things get a little bit dicey over here on the XRP price chart to show that it's actually right exactly on cue of what you would think would be happening if you were in that environment. That this rally and this takeoff and this behavior all happens right on point. That you can see these peaks come in here for the post-election rally, and then we go on and set another new high on the literal exact same day once again. And then it just meanders over here, hanging out, kind of waiting on Bitcoin to take its decision in here, right? So this opens up a door of concern at the same time, seeing these price behaviors happen like this on XRP, on these altcoins. Are we in Q4? And if we are in Q4, I think everybody's memory is really bad now because Q4 of 2021, everybody was waiting for an alt season. And then when 2022 came around, everybody was saying, what happened to the alt season? There wasn't one. Right? Everybody's very hyped right now, but seems to completely forget that aspect of 2021, that there wasn't one. And everybody was left shocked. So will this time be different, right? With these types of things and these types of setups that we're talking about here on XRP. HBAR, looking back on that 6 months from right now, if this does play out, and if I said to myself, why didn't I take any action when I saw that I would have to say, well, because I do a couple other things different that I thought maybe would end up transpiring. But this list is getting pretty large right now, right? We're talking about bearish divergences on the weekly time frame on Bitcoin. We've hit the exact amount of time for a full Bitcoin cycle. We know that in Q4 of 2021, it was not this majestic, crazy thing that people are trying to sell it as over there on Twitter. We've seen these ridiculous timings happen in here. We've got the DXY. We've got the Fed cutting. I had the setup I was looking for. Why didn't I take any action? And it would be because I'd have to say this time was going to be different for some reason or another. Yesterday, we saw the Russell try to poke out. I even tried to kind of take a little bit of a breakout trade on it to see how it would transpire if we could get a real breakout to happen. No, it totally waffled on itself with no real conviction on the actual move up there on the Russell. I think that was probably one of the more disappointing things for me to see, is kind of hoping like, all right, look, there's a lot of this stuff that's showing up here, this bearish stuff that's showing up in here. But if this Russell can just like definitively bust its way out of here, and then the altcoin market busts its way out of here, Ethereum busts its way out of here, well, man, the picture really changes. But again, we set another new high yesterday on Friday on the Russell, but then it kind of pulls back and everything kind of teeters around. And it's not to say that it won't happen later, but still we're there, with the lack of like any type of like major breakout or behavior, and reaching the 4.236 extension over here on the Russell 2000. And, the concerns I have over here that we're building a 5-wave kind of ending over here for the Dow. I think like at any moment there could just be some, floor dropout happen over here in the United States stock market. And that has become a very difficult pill to swallow for many people over time. And of course, it's even been real difficult for me to just kind of process it like crypto, and you're trying to grasp what is crypto as a whole. What are we using this for? What's it going to be used for? How do you value it? What determines whether or not it's time for it to have price appreciation or more value? What determines why do we go into bear markets and the average loss is like 90%? And then seeing that real strong relationship that's like mandatory to happen between equity markets and between the cryptocurrency market, that we build a lot of narratives for crypto, but in the end, it's fully dependent on macro. It's fully dependent on the equity market. And so there's a lot of times where it feels like we're just doing a high beta play of the equity market. And so your read on the equity market has to be phenomenal, right? And so I look over here at the equity market and I say, all right, we're still just kind of petering out over in here. And I really don't know what's going to happen to the markets if that silver goes busting out of there. And what is the message being sent to the market in that environment? Or even if it rejects from there, because we can look through that and there's various reactions in here. It's mostly down markets, down equity markets in both these rises and falls. But we definitely don't know what happens if it busts out fully and what message is being sent to the market. And in the end, this is one big macro play all at the exact same time. And whether or not there's an extremely clear macro picture. I remember a tweet from Elon Musk that he did eventually end up deleting, but I remember him saying it. He said, these tariffs are going to end up causing a recession in the second half of 2025 this year. He deleted that a few days later, but that's always been in the back of my head too. Fundamental analysis isn't really my thing because it requires you to be so subjective on determining what actually has value and what doesn't. So I try to remove as much subjective fundamental analysis as I can and try to really stack it with what can I see with the charts. Because with the charts, I can at least quantify it and say, well, I did it because here, this is why. And I can point to it. I can draw some lines. I can show some comparisons and say that's, that was the reason why. I don't have any better knowledge on a lot of fundamental things than everybody else. And I do understand everybody's got their bullish catalysts and their reasons for why this time is different, right? ETFs, crypto regulation, all those different things. I understand that. But I do also understand that this is one big giant play. And so as we get to these places right in here, as Bitcoin reaches its milestone of a full cycle, the thing that most content creators lean on during these time periods to say, hey, look, we still have plenty of time left. Well, today would mark the time where the time's up. I certainly don't hope for this to happen in here, but the structures are awfully familiar for them to do something like that, especially if it is true, if it is like Q4 2021, which everybody is saying it's Q4, right? Q4. No, that's not good. But, the things stack on themselves, whether you're at the top of time for Bitcoin, you're at the structure for Bitcoin. If we actually are like Q4 of 2021, and it's not different. Silver, dollar, Fed rate cuts, all those different things. I stack all of them together. So I say to myself, why didn't I do anything in the moment? I can imagine that being me 6 months from right now. Because the reality in the market is a lot of times you don't get second chances. Sometimes you get retraces and you get an opportunity for like a better alternative. But this market is flush full of leverage. We know how it works. And sometimes things can go horribly wrong very, very quickly in this market now due to how many participants utilize leverage. But Today marks the actual moment of how long the 2018 through 2021 cycle was. The indicators flash a lot of similarities to what they did back then. There's a lot of behavior in this market that mimics of exactly what we did back in 2021, especially with the timing of it, just like the timing of Bitcoin's breakouts and bottoms. But you still remain with 50% exposure in crypto. So a large chunk has been removed, but a large chunk still remains. If you guys recall, for like me feeling full blown absolute must go bear, it would be somewhere between 65 to 75%. I do have those concerns. I would say the only things that still give me reservations about that are that like, well, maybe silver does reject and it doesn't really mean anything. Maybe the Russell does bust out of here. The altcoin market rips and roars with it, right? You got Binance coin leading the way. You don't have the Bitcoin dominance falling yet, right? There's still that argument there. And that's the thing that people lean on. And I completely understand that. And even me personally, I'm leaning on it saying, you know what? I think I'm going to leave 50% in there because there's this argument. But at the same time, there's this other side of the argument. And so it's whether or not do I bet the whole house, right? Do I bet the whole house when I have all these things that are flashing here and not knowing which way it's going to end up going? If it goes to the upside and I bet the house, hey, that's great. But what if it goes to the downside? Then I have to say, oh no, why didn't I do anything when all those things were there? So in crypto Twitter, people love to chastise it and say, oh, we got to get the bear. I try to present everything and give you the data and the reasons and the justifications why, so you could see the things that I'm seeing. And then as long as I've given you the information, you have your own opinions on it, right? I never tell you when to buy. I never tell you when to sell. I'm not telling you to sell. I'm just telling you what I said I would do. And that if I do end up selling, I would tell you. For the reasons that have been listed so far in this video, probably plus other ones that I just couldn't get squeezed in here. Those are the concerns that I do have. And for the people who made it through the whole cycle, right? There's always the joke, right, of the mid-curve guy, overthinking it, overanalyzing, overdoing everything. But then, they got the guy on the left and the guy on the right. If their entire thesis was nothing like but that, well, they reached it, right? So, if Bitcoin ends up shooting out of here and going crazy, I'll have to really kind of reassess, what are my thoughts on this thing? What are we doing? Are we creating some type of crazy bubble that I just couldn't have imagined that ended up happening, right? Will my 50% become bukus of bunko dollars, right? And that's what I'm hoping, right? I've got enough in the market where it's like, if we go raging, if there is this crazy, insane 10, 20x stuff everybody's preaching about, guess what? I'm going to be just fine. I'm going to be doing great. But, if the market crashes and crumbles and, things kind of start falling apart cyclically here, I also have that protection at the exact same time, right? I've been in this market a very long time. You guys have been with me through way down here, and it looks a little bit less impressive when we're on log scale, but we'll take it off there. This is where we started together, right? And here we are. Can you believe it, right? So it feels good to get some money off the table. There's a little bit of a sigh of relief. It's real hard to go through those mental gymnastics if you don't have the own conviction for yourself. And that's what this whole week has really been for me. It's time to just build the case, try to understand it and say, where are we? What feels appropriate for me? And that's different for everybody. For some people, it's no way, man. I'm staying long the whole way. And dude, good for you. For some people, it's I'm out of here. And all right, good for you. Some people, maybe it's mid, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm not here to tell you what to do or what's right for you. What I'm here to show you is that you have a conflict, right? You do have a lot of things saying that, you've gone, the appropriate amount of time. And even for the people who are the 4-year cycle theorists, they're at a point right now where they should be saying this too. But what always ends up happening when we get here is we always end up hearing this time is different once we finally get to it. So we'll see how it transpires. I'm still very long the market, but also definitely have a safety cushion at this point right now. It feels kind of good. But let me wrap this video up with one more thing, and that's why 50%? Why is that the number that I've decided to go with out of any of them? Well, it's because of those things that we talked about with the Russell 2000 and with the Bitcoin dominance that are not identical to what happens when you're at actual tops. So while we can create a very big laundry list of them, there are some where you would say, well, this part has never happened. So are you saying this time is different? And that's a fair point, right? So it's difficult for me to hit the actual number of what I would say would be bear market number of like 65 to 75% because there's a couple of things that are a little different. But in the environment that we're in right now, I just definitely can't be at 0%. And so we're talking about this being 6 months from now and looking back into the past to this moment right now and saying, why didn't you do anything? And of course, we keep talking about it through the lens of it, ended up falling. and looking back 6 months and saying, why didn't you do anything, man? But I also have to think about the fact of, what if I completely am blind to the market? What if I'm just plain wrong? What if those things of the Bitcoin dominance do matter? What if the Russell is going to break out and it's going to get crazy? And what if instead of that, the market goes really, really high? And then 6 months from now, I have to look back at myself and say, why did you do that when the Bitcoin dominance was like that and the Russell 2000 was like that, right? And so markets are a game of living in the moment. Everybody is a 100% 2020 vision hindsight trader. When you're looking back into the past and you're saying, this was the appropriate time to do something. But when you're living in the moment, you're given a certain amount of information and you have to deal with that information as it's presented to you. And so when I look forward 6 months from right now and I say, if this ended up being the outcome, could I forgive myself, right? And I would say, sure. There were a lot of things at that time that were very uncomfortable. We'd already hit a 4-year cycle timing. There were bearish divergences on the weekly time frame. The altcoin market looked very similar to like Q4 of 2021, which wasn't majestic. Silver was knocking on its all-time high. The DXY had double bottomed. The Fed had started rate cuts. Yeah, it made sense that I had to do it. But I'm also really glad I didn't sell the whole house or sell the whole farm. But if we were here and I'm looking back and I'm saying, yeah, the Fed was starting their rate cuts, the DXY double bottomed, the Bitcoin hit its 4-year cycle, altcoins looked like they did in 2021. Why didn't you do anything? I'd say, well, I'm glad I did take 50% off the table. I'm glad I locked in some gains. And so when you live in the actual moment of time, I have to make these decisions live. There is not the element of hindsight. There's the element of real time. Then as time passes, we all have hindsight to determine, well, what ended up playing out. I also don't think I've positioned my personal portfolio in the lens of what would be an actual bear. So, when I think of positioning for a bear, I think there's really kind of two different elements that you would actually end up doing, or at least the way I've always thought I would end up doing it if I was fully 100% convicted. And that's that I would go to 65 to 75% cash. And then I would restructure the whole portfolio to be mostly Bitcoin and some large cap altcoins. That's how I would position it for me in the event of a true bear. And that may be the right thing to do here. So don't get me wrong that it may not be appropriate to not do that. Like that might be the right thing to do. But like we've said, there's the Bitcoin dominant situation, there's the Russell 2000 situation. And so for that, even though 50% of my capital is in the market, I'm actually still massively altcoin exposed. It is still 95% altcoins, which could prove to be detrimental because if this thing does go into a true bear, what's like the average loss on altcoins? It's like 90%. So it could get ravished. So the port is still positioned for the anomaly of the Bitcoin dominance not falling yet. But there's been a protective cash position that has been taken. So for me, if I was to be like completely convicted and come on here and tell you, hey, I am 100% convicted, we are having a bear, I would go to 65 to 75% cash, and I would restructure the portfolio to be massively Bitcoin heavy to anywhere between like 50 and 75%. So it's not just, how much cash do I have, but it's also restructuring the portfolio. And because of the Bitcoin dominance not falling, that is the reason why I haven't done that yet. It's not to mean it's not right, but it's just to kind of give you an element of, I recognize those things of like the Bitcoin dominance hasn't fallen, the Russell's knocking on the high. How are those things going to transpire? And we don't really know. And so if I'm going to leave capital in here, how do I feel like betting on it? And that's the bet that I'm taking. So we'll see how things go. We'll see how they transpire over the next couple of weeks. But hopefully that paints a pretty clear picture of the things that I see, the position that I kind of view it in, why I'm making the decisions that I am, how I'm doing it, why there's certain percentages, why it's structured in certain ways. I'm real observant of the market. I'm on like practically, I believe it's like a 21-day work week right now of really long days and really long nights. And this next week, I'm definitely going to be taking a lot of a break. You'll see me here and there. But it'll be much more calmed down next week because I think I've pretty much gotten the information out there that I wanted to get out. Now it's kind of like just sitting back and letting the market kind of do some of its action. And I think all the points have really been proven. So, it'll be a little spotty next week. I'm going to take some rest, but hop in whenever it seems like there needs to be something said. I'll be a lot less active on X. This was my most active week on X in history, but we're here. Today marks it. In the 2018 to 2021 bull market, today would have been the top. So do with that what you will. As for me, my portfolio is still ridiculously XRP heavy. I don't know if that's the right thing to do. But, for everybody who went through the entire lawsuit and all the years and all those things, right? I wanted to make sure I presented that for them because I do care about the people who watch my channel. I care about the XRP community tremendously. We have gone through a lot together. It's kind of an iffy moment in markets right now, and I just wanted to make sure I got that out to everybody. So I think it's kind of shocked a lot of people on X. People question, "Are you okay, dude?" Like, I'm okay. I'm okay. Everything is data backed, right? So I don't know. I hope that you enjoyed this. I do get it. This isn't the most favorable stuff that people like to watch. They want to hear big fat green ups, and I get that. But I hope you did enjoy seeing this and understanding the justifications that I have. So all right, that's going to be it. It's a Saturday morning. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much for watching my channel. Of course, I have a newsletter series over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. This most recent one, I do an audio recording with it of 52 minutes. It's where I really dive into a lot of the stuff of the bear case, the bull case, and just where we are at within the market. So if you'd like to read that, that's available over there. There's a link in the description of my YouTube videos, or you can just go to blockchainbacker.substack.com. Otherwise, have yourself a wonderful weekend. And I want to thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.